Well, shalom and welcome back to Reboot the Root. I'm so glad you've come back and joined me here on this channel, this Hebraic Roots channel, where we are examining our faith in Hebraic roots terms. And so what that really means is that we are returning back to the ancient paths as the original disciples of the Bible, the original first century church body of believers, how they believed in their theology and their doctrines. And we are taking closer looks at different topics in Hebrew roots, in the Hebrew roots type of faith of Christianity. We're taking a closer look at different topics and subjects that lead us into truth, that lead us into our journey of truth. And so throughout this journey of truth, we are questioning the answers that mainstream religion, mainstream Christianity has taught us. And so along the way, we have found that the road got a little bit more broader as we were walking it, and that was not the right road for us to be on. The road is supposed to be more narrow, amen? And so we are getting off the wide road and get on a more narrow road. And so we are tackling, or not we, but I'm tackling subjects that I believe that are important for you, especially those of you who are new to Torah keeping. And that's what this channel is really geared to. Those who are beginners in Hebrew roots, those who are beginning at re-examining their faith from a Torah keeping perspective, okay? So we're not throwing away Yeshua, we're not throwing away the New Testament, but we're embracing it more, but through Hebrew roots eyes. And so we're taking the Old Testament and putting it together with the New Testament, and we're examining the New Testament teachings and through a Old Testament or a Torah keeping lens. And so that's what I'm doing here on Rebooting the Root, and that is what we do because, as the name suggests, we're rebooting our root of our faith, okay? And so we're getting back to a Hebraic roots type of understanding. Well, if you've not become a subscriber already, I want to implore you to please consider hitting that subscribe button. What does subscribing do for you? What it does is that as I put out more videos, especially in this series, but also series to come, you will get a message, a notification that I've made a new video, okay? So that's what subscribing does for you, okay? And if you've liked this video, please don't be shy about hitting that like button, and also feel free to share this video with others on your social media, okay? And as we make more videos that appeal to what you're looking for, we will be able to increase our Reboot the Root family, or our little team here that we have of messianic believers, as you subscribe, as you like each video. And I want to encourage you to please make a comment in the comment section, okay? If you've got a question, or you've got a comment, or even a suggestion, please put that in the comment section. And if you rather send me an email, you can send it to reboottherootjourney@gmail.com. Well, that's enough for all that, and we're going to push forward in this this episode. And so what we want to do before we push forward is we want to do a really quick overview of what we've done in this Hebrew Roots 101 portion of Excuse My Hebrew. So what we were doing is I was giving you some basic things you need to know before we start getting into the letters and the numbers of the Hebrew alphabet, okay? So we came from learning about pictograph Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, and learning a little bit about the modern Hebrew lettering system. And we went kind of different places, mostly talking about the history of how the Hebrew language came to be and how it came to us, okay? And so we covered a lot of different things. The main thing that we want to remember that out of all those episodes is that we learned how to put Hebrew letters together, meaning that letters and words in Hebrew are read from right to left. And that's contrary to how we see English, which goes from left to right, okay? And that's probably the most important thing you need to remember out of the other previous episodes that you viewed. So that's really the basic review that I want to do, because now we're going to start getting into the letters and the alphabet of the Hebrew language. Okay, because this is probably what you've come here for, is to learn the Hebrew alphabet. So we're going to start. And so let's start by putting up a screen of the 27 letters of, actually it's the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There is 27 when you add the 5 final forms of certain letters in the Hebrew alphabet, but we'll get to that later. So we have 22 letters. So we're going to go through that right now as it's on the screen, and we're going to go over them really quick, and then we're going to spend the next episodes as they come after each other. We're going to take a closer look at each letter, okay? And then we'll finally be able to put together letters to form words. So let's take a look at our alphabet, okay? So this is typically called the Aleph-Bet because of the first 2 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Aleph and Bet, okay? It's called the Aleph-Bet. And we start off with, and remember, we're going from right to left, and we start off with the first letter, which is a silent letter, okay? It's one of 2 silent letters, okay? But the first one is Aleph, okay? The first letter is Aleph. Then we go to Bet, and Bet, depending on the Dagesh, which means a little dot in the center of it, it could be a Bet or a Vet, okay? And then we go on to the third letter, which is Gimel. It has a G sound. And from Gimel, we move on to Dalet. It obviously makes a D sound. And then we go from Dalet to the Hey sound, H-E, Hey. And so I want to back up to the Dalet. The Dalet will look a lot like some other letters, like the Resh, okay? So you got to be careful you don't confuse that Dalet with the Resh. Then we went on to Hey, okay? And that has an H sound to it, obviously. Then we move on to a letter that can either sound like Vav or Wav, okay? And so it depends on what kind of dialect we're going with. And so that looks kind of like a really short backwards R, okay? And then from then we go on to Zayin, okay? And that makes its own interesting sound that we'll get into later. That looks kind of like a crooked T, okay? So that makes a Zion, a Z sound in it, okay? Then we move on to the Het. No, it's not called Chet. It's pronounced Het. It has a guttural sound, okay? So a lot of times you hear a lot of Hebrew words that have a to it. That's because there's a Het letter in there. Then we move on to the Tet sound, and that makes a T sound, Tet. Then we move over to the 10th letter, which is Yod, okay? Yod. It's actually the smallest, tiniest letter in the alphabet, okay? Yod. And it can also make sort of a silent sound, if you will. It's not one of the 2 I was telling you about, but it can make a sort of a silent sound. Then we go to Kaf, and so you have to be careful of stylized lettering, all right? Because because of the jots and tittles, the different little tiny bits of marks that make one letter different from another, those are the jots and the tittles. All right, and then we move over again to the left, we get the Kaf, okay? That's the final form. That's the final form of Kaf is the next one. It looks like a long resh, so that's one of That's the first of the final form letters, is the elongated Qaf. And then we move over to Lamed. Okay, Lamed. It has an L sound to it. Okay, and then we move over to another letter that has a final form to it. We get over to the Mem, and then also the final Mem. Okay. Then we move on to another letter that has a final form. It's the Nun. That also can be very confusing, kind of looking like some other letters. Kind of might look like the Bet or the Qaf letter, or Kof letter. So that's Nun. Okay, and then that also has a final form to it, which the Nun has a long tail to it, as you can see, which will make a final Nun. And on that word, final forms, those are always going to appear at the end of a word. Okay, and so you'll be able to see that a little later as we get into the final forms of letters. Then we get into the Samic. It's one of the two S sounds, S-making sounds of the Hebrew alphabet is Samic. Okay. And then we get into the second of the silent letters I was telling you about, is Ayin. It makes an I sound, Ayin. Or it makes an E, like the word Yeshua. It uses the Ayin letter in that. And then we get to the final row. We get into the final of the final forms. Actually, it's not the final forms. It's one of the last two final form letters, and that is the Pei or the Fei. So it kind of acts like the Bet or the Vet. It can, depending on the dogish in the middle of the letter, it could be either Pei or Fei. Okay, and then we also have a final form of that. It has an elongated tail that sinks down below all the other letters to make it a final F sound, Fei, okay, or Pei, in that matter. And then we have the last of the final form letters, which is Sadi, okay, and it makes a sa sound, okay, and it also has a final form of that as well. It kind of looks like a fancy looking Y, doesn't it? And that one could be very confused with the ayin, so you have to be very careful. This is where the forms and the drawing of the letters is very important, that you don't get the sadi confused with the ayin. And then we move on to the kof. The kof, that kind of looks like a P, doesn't it? It looks kind of like a P, but it makes a kof, a Q sound, okay? Then we move on to our final letters. The first of the final letters, well, the final three, not final form, but the last three, is the resh. Okay, that can be confused with the dalet. With the dalet, we had a little tail hanging off the top of it, but the resh does not have one. And so you have to be very, very, very careful. And then we get on to the sheen, and that can make a sh sound or an s sound, depending on if there's a doggish dot on the left or the right of it. So you got to make sure you're looking at if there's a dot on the left or the right of it. The dot on the left would be a sh sound, and the dot on the right would be a s sound, okay? And then our final letter would be the tav letter, okay? Tav. And that could be confused easily with the hey or the chet letters, okay? So you have to be very careful. So the tav is the last letter, and aleph is the first letter. And that's very important because we know Yeshua is the aleph tav, the first and last. The first letter, which is aleph, and the final letter, which is tav. He's the aleph tav. And then we get into gematria, or the numbers of Hebrew, okay? So we also have numbers in Hebrew, and they are all associated. Numbers are associated through each letter. So let's go over those really quick, okay? So aleph means 1, bet means 2, gimel means 3, dalet means 4, the hey means 5, the vav means 6, the The zayin makes the 7th letter. The het makes the 8th letter. The tet letter is equal to 9, and then the yod is 10. So let's go over that real quick. So 1 through 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're represented by the aleph, the bet, the gimel, the dalet, the hey, the vav, the zayin, the het, tet, and the yud. Okay, and then we get into the final letters, but not letters. I mean into the other numbers. They go in multiples of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Okay, and so they have that on the screen, and then. When we get into over 90, we get into 100, 200, 300, and 400. So 100 is represented by the kof, and then 200 is represented by the resh, 300 is represented by the sheen or the sin letter, and then 400 is represented by the tav. Okay, so that is our gematria. That's where we at. We didn't make it to the. We didn't make it to actually get into the first letter or the second letter, but I did want to cover over with you the Hebrew letters and the numbers so you have that understanding, because we're getting ready to go into individual letters. So anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode of Excuse My Hebrew. Please join me again next episode where we'll continue to look at the Hebrew letters. Anyway, if you've liked this video, please hit that like button and feel free to share this video, okay? And anyway, this is ReBoot the Root saying shalom.